To unpack the real issues affecting the Tasman nations, this is Trans-Tasman Talk. Jointly produced by the Unshackled.net and rightminds.nz. Now here's Tim Wilms in Australia and Dewey DeBoer in New Zealand.
Hello everyone and welcome back for another week and another show on this Tuesday the 4th of February 2020. It is 7 p.m. here in Melbourne.
And it is 9 p.m. here in Auckland, and we've got a bit of a summer heat wave, so it's still about 30 degrees or so in the evening. Just starting to cool off. Hopefully I get some of it. Hopefully it gets a bit cooler during the show.
Climate change.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's getting beyond the point at which we can cope with it here. It's coincidentally also getting close to the middle of summer as well at the same time as this climate change.
Yeah, because people forget that February is also a month of summer. They've forgotten which months the actual seasons are.
We're live on the Right Minds YouTube channel, and we're also going to have a embed on the BFD today as well. And thank you to all of those sharing this stream on social media channels, and it's good to see a lot of you in the chat already.
Yep, and we're live on the Unshackled's YouTube channel. A reminder that the main Unshackled channel continues to be monetized, which means you can send us a super chat directly via YouTube. In the live chat, you just look for the $sign, and then you can pledge your amount, any amount, and we will read it out, provided it's within the YouTube community guidelines. Otherwise, I'll paraphrase it best I can. And we're also on the Tim Wilms D-Live channel, which I've been using for my Wilmsfront program and also for Trans-Tasman Talk as well. Obviously, that's a platform popularized by Nick Fuentes and a lot of the other grouper streamers, so we're making sure that our presence is there as well. So you can send us the show Lemons, which is the cryptocurrency of the platform, which also helps myself and the Unshackled co-produce this show.
And you can also use Entropy now on the Right Minds YouTube channel, since we're not monetized by YouTube. I've just posted the link again in the chat, and it's at the top, and I'll try to remember to post it sporadically. You can ask questions and give donations during the show if you like, and the same rules apply as well. Anything that is within YouTube's terms and conditions will be read out, and questions will be answered as well.
Now, some breaking news today. It's the first Tuesday of the month, which means our Reserve Bank of Australia meets to determine what the interest rates will be. They'd previously set it at a record low of 0.75%. There was speculation that it would be lowered to an even record low to 0.5, but they've kept it steady at 0.75. So it's still dangerous. The reason why I call it dangerously low is because that means that the Reserve Bank, they have to print more money to get the interest rates down to that level, which is it's only prolonging a looming recession and also making us all poorer through inflation. I'll get to Australia's fiscal problems later in the show.
And New Zealand's official cash rate will be revisited in the future, so we'll get to that as it comes up throughout this year. We dropped down to 1.0 in August last year, and the current predictions are that we'll be dropping down to 7.5, just like Australia as well. And the buzz about negative interest rates continue in the background. Like Tim has said before, likely we're heading into that direction and may even reach negative interest rates in an attempt to stop a recession.
And we should also give an update, even though it's not Trans-Tasman news. The Iowa caucuses kicked off the Democratic presidential primaries, so we will give you an update on the results of that. There is no results, there is no update, because the Democrats were using an app to record do the head count at the caucuses, which are in basketball courts and town halls, because a caucus is where you go to your local community hall or wherever and stand in the corner of the candidate you want to choose. So it's a little bit more difficult than just counting of votes, but they've done it for how many years now, this caucus system. But in 2020, the Democrats have stuffed their primaries up at the first hurdle, which is extremely lol.
Yeah, absolutely. And Trump got 97% in his caucus, so the only winner in Iowa today is President Trump. So that's the start the Democrats were hoping for. Yeah, it's somebody mentioned that I was a little bit quiet. I have just put my volume up a little bit, so do let me know if my sound is better, and else we'll get Tim to bump me up a little bit more.
Yeah.
Yeah, you've probably seen the title of the show as well. We will be talking about the coronavirus later on, but first we'll be dealing with a few other fighting issues. There's various hate speech legislation to talk about, and various gang violence in New Zealand. There are leadership spills in Australia. So we're going to go through all of these one at a time.
I just turned you up live on air.
Thank you. Yes, I'm seeing that. I've got to keep talking and not get distracted. So we'll get around to that. The first election update for New Zealand is that Simon Bridges from the National Party ruled out working with New Zealand First and Winston Peters specifically. So okay. And so we're not going to have a New Zealand First National Party coalition at the end of this year. So it will definitely be the current government coalition versus National Party and the ACT Party. And in that similar vein, Simon Bridges did endorse David Seymour in the Epsom electorate. So that should guarantee his re-election, since the National Party won't put an actual challenger against him. They will put somebody up, but he will only be campaigning for the party vote.
For those Australians who are a bit confused about that, with MMP, mixed member proportionate, a minor party, to get seats in the parliament, they either have to win 5% of the overall vote, the 5% threshold, or win one lower house seat. Those are the two different benchmarks. And ACT, well, when was the last time they got 5%? It was ages ago. So national...
3 or 4 election cycles ago. Yeah.
As a tactical election strategy, they gift that seat of Epsom, which is in a leafy Auckland suburb, to ACT.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is basically the wealthiest, or one of the wealthiest suburbs in the country. But it wasn't initially gifted to them. It was actually won by Rodney Hyde. There was a deal with John Banks, and since then, the National Party hasn't really contested it very heavily. So that's the way it is. We're not sure which way it would go if they actually did contest it. That is up for debate, but we won't get to find out because they won't contest it. So,
Paul Film Co-op has just sent through a $2 Australian super chat. He said, "Is the New Zealand guy a cuck, masculine up and crack jokes?" He obviously didn't see you during the pre-show. It was so hot that you stripped off.
Yeah, I did put on a shirt for the actual show, so you should be thankful for that. I'll try and make some more jokes then, but it's less funny if I'm trying. So.
Well, yeah, you prefer to be spontaneous.
Yeah. And I tend to be more conservative as well, so that lowers my humor level a little bit, I'm afraid. we did have a comment saying the last time ACT was over the 5% threshold was in 2002, so it was nearly 20 years ago that they broke that threshold. And so the electorate seat means if they get over 1% of the vote, they get a second MP and so on, and every other party needs to break 5%.
So there's, with Simon Bridges making this decision months in advance of the election, there's certainly a lot of bad blood still between National and New Zealand First. And they went into coalition the first time MMP was introduced in 1996, and that was a spectacular, glorious disaster.
Yes, and Winston Peters was initially a National MP. He defected, and there's been a lot of bad blood, and it's been building up ever since then. So the chances of him going with National anyway would be low, but at the moment there's no bargaining position to be had at all. So on election night, we will know what the results is, unless the National Caucus would roll Simon Bridges and replace him with someone who would want to do a deal. This is assuming Winston Peters survives as well. The polling on that is currently a bit iffy. So you might see more what's left of the working class on the left support him to keep the Greens out of power. So that's the issue. If the polls point to Labour and the Greens, there may be left-leaning people who don't want the Greens in government. So that might be his lifeline.
I got a news alert today because I'm on all the New Zealand news apps, so I get alerts for all of them that New Zealand First, they're going to be targeting to win the seat of Northland again, which Winston Peters had won in the past, which that'd save them if they fell below 5%.
Yes, but he has lost. He did lose that electorate in the last election, and it's not looking like they're, it doesn't look good for them. They're going to run Shane Jones, who we've talked about at least a dozen times on the show.
Oh yeah, they're the colourful. He's sort of like he seems to be the New Zealand version of Barnaby Joyce, who as well he's been in the news in the last 48 hours, which I'll get to in my Australian politics wrap. Very colourful maverick.
And there are talks. We have a number of Maori electorates, 7 of them, I believe. The number changes sometimes, so someone in the comments can correct me. And they are currently all held by the Labour Party, but they may be challenged by the Maori Party, who are a race-based party who run in those electorates, and also by the Green Party. So we have one of the Green MPs who says they're going to try really hard to contest one of these. I think the chances for all of these people are slim, but there's always upsets that could happen, and we'll talk a lot about that on election night in however many months we have left now. I think 7 or 8 months.
Did you say that the Maori Party, they're a race-based party or racist party?
They're a race-based party. But yes, racist is how many people would classify them. Yeah.
Well, the fact that you have in New Zealand since the Treaty of Waitangi, in case I don't see you again, happy Waitangi Day on Thursday. New Zealand has had those racist seats since the Treaty of Waitangi.
We initially had them because when the franchise was extended to landowning men, because most Maori lived in communal settings, they were actually given the vote first, and slowly had these seats built up. But most people would consider them to be obsolete now. If we held a referendum on them, they would disappear. And we do have quite a few Maori in Parliament, way more than the seats there. So there's like 7 seats, but we have like 3 times or 4 times as many MPs in Parliament. So there's no real need for them. But they hold there's political reasons why they're still around. Yeah. And this is a good topic to move into Waitangi Day, because on the last show we were talking about Jacinda Ardern needing a deal, some kind of deal with the Imuato protests, where they, were going to have this land. The plan is to have this land designated heritage land that's being occupied by illegal protesters, and then have the council buy the land from the developer so that they can, get rid of the protesters. But that seems to have been scuttled by Winston, and there's no deal that I foresee happening tomorrow. So she's going to have to go to Waitangi on that, with that, the risk of protests. But there actually have been, she has put forward kind of an olive branch of sorts where she's put forward a law change to scrap rates arrears on Maori land. So this is land that's communally owned and nobody pays the rates to the councils, but the council's not allowed to confiscate communally owned land to pay the rates. So all of this land can't be developed because of the debt that's on it. So she's basically said that they're going to scrap. Let's see. It doesn't say. Actually, can't see how much. I think $20 million. So this is just in Northland. The Northland District Council is owed about $20 million in unpaid rates on Maori land. So there may still be a boost in the realm of tens of millions of dollars that may get her through on Waitangi Day.
So will she reimburse the councils for the unpaid rates?
That I don't actually know.
Because I'm a bit confused. Are the rates going to be paid, or is the debt going to be forgiven, or? Yeah,
so the scrapping, basically forgiving the debt. So the rates arrears will simply be wiped out. But I'm not sure if the government is underwriting that and paying the councils. So let's see. Oh no. So it says it would allow the local government to write off any rates they consider unrecoverable. So it would just be written off as bad debt by the council, and they're not paid for by anybody. Well, not paid for by the taxpayers. But in a way, yeah.
I wouldn't like to be a paying ratepayer in Northland Council, because that seems mighty unfair and discriminatory.
Well, it's exactly what it is, and that is, that's it does create a lot of tension around Waitangi Day, and so some people see it not as a national day of celebration, but rather as a day of grievance, and some people very much hate the day. But I enjoy that. I enjoy the day off and celebrate the good things, but I don't go up to the Waitangi celebrations like most people don't either. It's very, very politicized. So
it sounds like it's actually worse than our Australia Day, because yes, there's the Invasion Day protests in every city, and of course it's worse in Melbourne, where they're allowed to basically occupy the CBD, but there's no sort of, like, not even Sydney Cove, where Governor Arthur Phillip put the British flag. It's not really like the central sacred site. It's because it's Australia Day. It's significant everywhere. So there's not this central place where the grievance industry can all go and focus on and converge on and ruin the day. They've got to try, and the Invasion Day people try and occupy the whole country if they wanted to make an effective protest.
Exactly. So we did have 3 years in the 70s where it was changed to New Zealand Day, but that was only for 3 years. So there is still a campaign to change it to New Zealand Day, or to have a separate New Zealand Day. Or even there have been proposals to alter Waitangi Day, to move it around the country, so to not have it focused in Waitangi, but to move it to the different spots where the chiefs met to sign the treaty up and down the country. But again, the entrenchment of this is so heavy, I just don't see any of that happening. So enjoy the day off. People go to the beach and do gardening, and I would just celebrate. That's what I do anyway. Celebrate it like the national holiday and the birth of the nation that it should be celebrated as.
New Zealand, there's no exact, because obviously we have unofficially Federation Day, which is January 1, 1901, but New Zealand, it was never a colony of states. It was just a progression over the years. It just gained more independence.
Exactly, and so that's why the 6th of February from 1840 is marked as the founding day of the nation, because that's where the founding document, the Treaty of Waitangi, comes from, and everything built up slowly beyond that. And I mean, there had been a lot of stuff building up before that as well. There's not even an arrival day like you had, with the first fleet arriving in New Zealand had, whalers and other merchants and missionaries, and so very slow a trickle of people, very slow movement of settlers in, and it didn't really organise until later.
I'll move on to Australian politics summary, because our federal parliament was back for 2020 this week. I mentioned, I spoke with you last week about the sports rorts scandal involving the agriculture minister and deputy Nationals leader Bridget Mackenzie. She was, before the federal election, was sports minister. She's now agriculture minister, but before the election, she was responsible for allocating community sports grants. And an Auditor General's report said that this was skewed towards marginal electorates against the advice of Sports Australia, the statutory body. And the reason why this has stuck more than other scandals is because obviously Australia is a sporting nation, and if you're like really struggling sporting groups like the regional football and netball clubs that spent all that time putting in grant applications and haven't got it because they didn't live in the right electorate, then that's quite egregious to a lot of quiet Australians, to use the term. But we spoke last week that why is the government picking winners and losers in local sporting clubs at all? But what made things worse is that the Morrison government, because Peter Van Onselen, he's a journalist for Network 10's, uncovered a lot of evidence that this was directed by the Prime Minister's office, and so it went right to the top. And so they couldn't really scapegoat her, and that's why Scott Morrison had said they were all eligible. It was within the guidelines. There's a bit of confusion. You know how the public service, there's sort of guidelines and rules when they're clearly doing something which doesn't pass the pub test. They say, oh, it was within the guidelines or rules.
Within the letter of the law. Yes, that's the very, very common excuse. So, did you have who was the replacement?
So the way they eventually were able to justify it was she resigned on the Sunday because the Secretary of the Department of Prime Minister and Cabinet was investigating because a gun club that she was an honorary member of received a grant which she didn't excuse herself from. So that was the breach where she had to resign. So they didn't say that the whole scheme was rotten. There was just that declaration. But of course, she's the scapegoat to make the scandal go away. And because she is Deputy Nationals leader, the National Party is the junior coalition partner to Scott Morrison's Liberal Party, that opened up a vacancy in the deputy leadership, and the Nationals leader and Deputy Prime Minister Michael McCormack, ever since he was elected to the position, has been in the shadow of his predecessor, Barnaby Joyce. I'm sure you in New Zealand will know who he is. He didn't know until it was 2017 that he was actually a Kiwi himself, because his father that was
sleeper agent.
And that was I think one of your naughty Labour MPs asked a question of the Justice Minister at the time. He was the former United Future, Peter Dunn, asked a question hypothetically if this, and it was about Barnaby Joyce, and so that was termed foreign interference.
That's right. It was. It was no Russians involved, just New Zealand, just New Zealanders trying to bring down the Australian government.
But Barnaby Joyce, he was found ineligible, recontested one New England, but then it was reported the next year that entire time when he was found to be ineligible, had to contest a by-election, media staff, Vicky Campion, and she'd got pregnant, which what turned out to be Barnaby's first son with his ex-wife Natalie. They had four daughters, and the fallout from that eventually led him to resign, but Barnaby Joyce, he didn't enter politics to just sit on the backbench. He recontested New England at the federal election, and he's pretty much been bored out of his brain on the backbench. And Michael McCormack is a pretty bland, vanilla politician, and so doesn't really excite people. Do you know who Michael McCormack is? Do you know what he looks like?
No.
But you know who Barnaby Joyce is?
Yeah, I do. Yeah.
And Barnaby Joyce, he's since had a second son with Vicky Campion. So
he doesn't know when to quit, does he?
Yes, he's got his 4 daughters with his first wife, and now 2 sons with his new partner. So he's got a large blended family. He confessed during the end of last year that it's almost sending him to the wall in terms of paying all the support and that. This is the sort of stuff he can't keep quiet. So he says stuff which he's trying to make a point and be relevant, but it always comes across the media are always going to skew it. So he obviously with this vacancy in the deputy leadership, it was there was a leadership potential leadership vacuum. One of his supporters, Ken O'Dowd, moved a leadership spill today. Barnaby Joyce said he would contest because he and his supporters believed he'd spent enough time in the sin bin, if you pardon the pun. But he failed to get up. Michael McCormack was re-elected. The National Party room, they don't reveal the vote totals, so everyone's been frantically speculating today about because there's 21 Nationals MPs. Some have been speculating it was as close as 11-10, but we'll never know. Only the whip knows, and then they destroy the ballots. That's been the National Party convention. But Barnaby Joyce and his chief ally in the party room, Matt Canavan, resigned from cabinet, and Michael McCormack is not going to put him back there. And then you've also got Bridget McKenzie on the backbench as well. So you've got basically these high-profile
politics. This is the kind of politics you can't get in New Zealand with MMP. It can't, because the leader can just basically boot people out of the party. You don't have this kind of once you lose favor, you can't get back in unless you hold an electorate, and even then, those are controlled very tightly from the top in New Zealand. So it's I don't want to say refreshing or nice to listen to this, but it's a good break from the kind of the boring same old stuff that happens in New Zealand politics, to have all of this scheming and the House of Cards stuff going on behind the scenes in Australia.
Well, because the Liberals and Nationals, even though they're a coalition together, they're separate parties. And so Scott Morrison, he can't do a thing about the National Party. They will continue to tear themselves apart. He can't do anything about it because he's a Liberal, and it's highly inappropriate for them to get involved in each other's affairs. But he's just got to basically suck up that there's going to be this disgruntled cohort on the National Party backbench. David Littleproud, who was the Water and Emergency Services Minister, he's now the new Nationals deputy. He's from the lower house, so he'd probably want to knock off McCormack himself in maybe a year's time. But you could tell today Michael McCormack, with not having Barnaby Joyce and Matt Canavan back in cabinet, is basically being quite vindictive and vengeful in saying, I'm going to punish these people for undermining my leadership. And there was the previous time there was tensions. Barnaby Joyce, he made the mistake of saying that the Nationals were not married to the Liberal Party, and like the leader should stand up to them more. And so Michael McCormack said, I know what it takes to have a successful marriage in politics.
Ouch.
Yeah. He walked into that one, but it was a pretty epic burn.
That's those, them fighting words, right? That's it gets nowhere near that hot in New Zealand politics. Definitely not.
Well, the Barnaby affair. That was sort of we don't really have sex scandals in Australian politics. The electorate aren't really interested in it, but because this one, it involved a staffer. It was obviously mired in politics, and that's when Malcolm Turnbull introduced what was known as the bonking ban, that politicians and staffers must not have sexual relations with each other.
Yeah. We did have I think we did have a sex scandal around the same time in New Zealand politics or later on with Jamie Lee Ross, who ended up being kicked out again. He got kicked out of the National Party, so it was in a sense resolved fairly quickly, where the offending individual was simply purged from the party ranks. And he will be contesting the Botany electorate again against the former Air New Zealand CEO. So that's going to be an interesting something to watch.
I mean, there's another Nationals MP, George Christensen from Central Queensland, who he's marrying a Filipino woman, and he spent a lot of time, it was revealed through travel documents, in the Philippines. He was dubbed the member for Manila, and there's been a lot of rumours and scuttle reporting about where he may have visited while he was spending all that time in the Philippines, but nobody actually really cared about that. His electorate didn't care. They re-elected him with a 10% swing because they wanted the Adani coal mine there. That's just sort of, it's been reported on, but nobody really cares about George Christensen, what he gets up to.
Yeah, and especially if the local members of the voters and the electorate are happy with the MP and want support the policies, then usually they tend to care a lot less about their private life. For instance, as we've seen, especially with Donald Trump in the United States and so on, it becomes more of a we're voting for the one who's going to get us what we want.
Yeah, I think it's unless you're trying to be like the most moral politician that there is,
then it would be damaging.
Yeah, it's the hypocrisy thing, and obviously Barnaby, he was a family values campaigner against same-sex marriage, and then this happened.
Have you got any other updates, or shall we move on to the
second? There was another leadership.
Interesting.
Change, or this was a change. Richard Di Natale, the leader of the Australian Greens, he announced his resignation as leader yesterday, and he will be resigning from the Senate to spend more time with his family. I know that's a cliche, but it is genuinely the reason. He's got 2 young boys, 9 and 11, and he's missed out on a lot of their growing up to date, because obviously being the leader of a national political party and a federal politician, you've got to travel all around the country. Though it's a lot of people have been pointing out that obviously the Greens, they're up with the sort of new definition of families. They don't really believe in gender, but Richard Di Natale has decided to resign so that he can raise his two sons, so they have a father figure in their lives.
More family values in the Green Party than the National Party over there, and it's actually something that's common. I saw a study last week that revealed that basically in these elite and very liberal circles, they actually do, they do form proper families. They don't have, their divorce rate is very low. They live in these gated communities, so they promote all of the, all of this alternative lifestyle and do what you want to other people, but they themselves actually live, very conservative lives themselves.
And I know that it's a cliche, politicians quitting to spend more time with their family, but it's actually becoming more of an actual reason why politicians are deciding to retire early. Kelly O'Dwyer, she was, when she first got elected to Parliament in 2009 for the Melbourne seat of Higgins. That was former Treasurer Peter Costello's seat. She was considered one of the bright stars of the party, and she became a cabinet minister under Malcolm Turnbull. But she retired at the last election. She'd only just, I think, turned around 40. She had 2 young children, and she decided that was more important. And it's not a gender thing either. Richard Di Natale is resigning to spend more time with his family. He's a male. Kelly O'Dwyer is a female. And there was also the member for Perth, Tim Hammond. He resigned mid-term. He'd only just been elected, but the travel to Canberra was just too much of a strain on his young family, and so he couldn't even make it to the next election. He had to pull the pin there. So we do bag politicians quite a bit, but it's a bloody tough life. You only find that you get to do the things that sort of the really like things that you entered politics to do. That's only like a small window of opportunity. The rest is all the day-to-day, just making sure that everything is running.
Yeah. And most of the time you become a cog in the machine, and so very few politicians manage to break out of that as well. So I suppose they replaced him with someone, really nice and, good public image and environmentally friendly, non-crazy, loony kind of guy, right?
Well, there were a few people celebrating his resignation, and I know that we've mocked Richard Di Natale in the past, but when he announced his resignation, a lot of people, I and a lot of other people on the right, were saying, don't celebrate because he's going to be replaced with somebody worse. And he has been. Adam Bandt, the member for Melbourne in the lower house, he's the new Greens leader, and before he entered Parliament, he was undertaking a PhD, which was called Work to Rule, Rethinking Marx. And so he's
a good classic Marxist, of course.
He's the language on the climate emergency has been much more strong than Di Natale. He's called for climate trials, that the Australian people need to rise up to overthrow the Morrison government. Very Marxist revolutionary language. He's been to a lot of the local Melbourne protests organised by the local socialist alternative, so he'll take a very hard line. Richard Di Natale was always more of a moderate collegial. He was prepared to work with the Morrison government to get legislation passed, but yeah.
And that's what's happened to it looks like your Greens are shifted where ours went a while ago. And yeah, it's all just the Marxists and at the socialist rallies and all kinds of bizarre, crazy stuff that they do. Yeah.
There is also 2 deputy co-leaders. So Larissa Waters, the Senator for Queensland, she is a co-deputy leader, and so is Nick McKim from Tasmania. Maureen Faruqi, the Senator for New South Wales, and Sarah Hanson-Young, the Senator for Western Australia, missed out on the deputy's position out of a party room of 10. Maureen Faruqi, she's called, because the Greens in New Zealand, they have co-leaders. They have one.
They have to have a male and a female co-leader. So there are only 2 genders in the
I know
party. Thankfully, it's good. So they've got but they've got a caucus of I want to say 7 or 8. And yeah, they have 2 leaders. But I can imagine that you've got 10 people in the party, and 3 of them are leaders.
Yeah. Hey. A lot of people did fear that maybe Sarah Hanson-Young would become the leader, but the chatter was that no, the Green Party room, they are self-aware enough to know that her as leader would be a disaster.
Yeah.
And update on her defamation case against David Linehelm, because she was awarded $120,000 in damages in the federal court at the end of last year. Now David Linehelm has to pay her $500,000 in indemnity costs or legal costs now, which is obviously much higher than the initial 120,000, and David Linehan said he is going to appeal, but that's a lot more than the initial judgment.
And well, let's get on to the coronavirus before our time runs out this evening. So the latest developments in New Zealand have been in the last week have been that we have closed our borders. Finally, a few days after Australia did. We thankfully have no known cases in the country. We've had a few scares, a few possible cases, but currently it looks like we are able to get away without any at all. The Chinese consulate was very offended and very upset because
they've been offended with us as well. So
they closed their borders first. By the way, I just want to say they stopped outgoing flights first, right? So.
Sino-sensitivity, I call it. The Chinese, they're all too happy to jump on the racist bandwagon, because I'm not sure if it's been the case in your media, but our media and of course the commentators on Twitter have said we've got to crack down on people using the coronavirus as an excuse to be racist, and our Murdoch Herald's son called it a China virus.
Yeah, the Chinese virus, was it the Chinese flu or something along those lines? But yeah, and that's I just ran a search before we did the show, and I had at least half a dozen links to New Zealand media stories, different ones about warning about the dangers of racism towards the Chinese. And so on, but a lot of it is initially was at least people's reactions when anyone from China could step off the plane in New Zealand and walk around, they could have the virus, and so people would start to think, is this guy next to me just gotten off the plane? But we did have a few actual incidents. One that the police is investigating in terms of racism. So the police are very busy making sure people don't say racist things. So the case here is the Canterbury police are investigating after multiple parents at a school in Ralston received an email telling them to keep their kids at home.
Just putting it on there.
You've got the thing there, and I quote here, "You Asians are virus spreaders," and so that email has been is being investigated by the police. I'm not entirely sure what the crime will be when they find the guy who sent it. Anyway, there was a time where this kind of stuff would just be, brushed off and dealt with a local matter. Maybe the guy would be named and shamed. But we live in a time where this gets referred to the police because they don't have anything better to do. The New Zealand violent crime is up in New Zealand. Check exactly by how much. The police have abandoned the entire regions of the country, basically saying the gangs are out of control out in the Hawke's Bay. We're going to get to this later on in the show, but I don't think we'll have time.
It's a good segue now.
It is a perfect segue, just very briefly. So I've got the latest crime stats here. So assaults have been up 6%. You've got it on the screen, very good. Sexual assaults have been up 5%, burglaries have been up 6.3%, and thefts up 8%. And of course, this is a break from the trend, which is that crime was going down. I've got a story here from TVNZ saying, and this is sort of last week's news that has been developing, but a top cop saying, we're not going to arrest our way out of this. So they can't arrest the gang members. Violent crime is going up. The police have even stopped carrying firearms in the Hawke's Bay. I read this story the other day. I don't think I sent you a link for that, but they've actually stopped carrying guns. So all police throughout all of New Zealand are armed, except for in the Hawke's Bay, because it may escalate tensions with the gangs. So you know who's running the show. Hawke's Bay, the gang numbers have been up 35% in the last 2 years as well. So we are, but the police have plenty of time to investigate people sending racist emails.
Well, it sounds like you're getting the Britification of your police, where, well, it seems they're They're more interested in arresting and fining people for misgendering the British police rather than cracking down on rape gangs, acid attacks, knife attacks. And you're also getting a bit of Victorian era crime here, and I mean the state of Victoria. What is this Hawke's Bay? So this is a crime hotspot. Can you sort of give a brief geography lesson?
So I'm actually not too familiar with the Hawke's Bay, but I know that it's there's a lot of mongrel mob gang members there, I believe. So there are a lot of which I believe is mostly I think it's the one we talked about.
Where the guy that had a swastika on his forehead.
He's not quite Hawke's Bay, but it's similar. So they've got more people like that. So they run all of these weird sort of Maori Nazi hybrid gangs where they go around, in quite bizarre fashion. And it looks like they've basically taken over the place and they run the town. And the Hawke's Bay, I want to say, is on the east coast of the North Island. And I've actually never really spent much time there myself, so it's hard to tell you much about it.
And you won't be going there.
I won't be going there. Oh, what a prediction! So someone's just confirmed that is the East Coast, and that's about all that I know about it, really. But I have heard from people it is a lovely spot in terms of scenery, and it looks very nice. But when it's and it may be like I said, the police there are not even carrying guns anymore, so it might be the gangs might be giving you a better deal than the police at this point. And they're definitely not going to investigate you for racist comments. So,
Well, apparently they're looking at strengthening New Zealand's hate speech laws so that there can be more punishment for emails like the one we put on screen before. We should have put a trigger warning up because there could be somebody who say that. Yeah.
Yeah, sorry. You should issue a belated apology to everyone watching the show that we didn't give you a trigger warning before that email.
It was purely for news purposes.
We will in the future, because Andrew Little has said they're trying to bring up the they're trying to bring up another firearms law before March, and they're also trying to bring in their hate speech review before March or around March as well to coincide with the 1-year anniversary of the terrorist attack in Christchurch. We know that the National and ACT MPs will vote against those, so it's actually going to be a question of whether New Zealand First and Winston Peters will sink those in order to sort of try and get themselves re-elected. So that's our saving grace possibly at this point. And there's also going to be some internet filtering has been discussed as well. So they want to strengthen the ability that the government has to filter the internet, which we saw come into play at that time in both Australia and New Zealand. And we discussed this last year. Various sites that were blocked and so on. And they want to help with counter-terrorism and fighting hate and extremism in all of these quotes here. And, who knows? Well, we know exactly what definitions they're going to use for all of those. So.
Well, in my home state of Victoria, the Parliament is having a review of our Racial and Religious Tolerance Act, which is the act that Blair Cottrell was convicted over the mock beheading outside Bendigo City Council building in 2015. Fiona Patten, the Reason Party, formerly Sex Party MP, proposed including sexual orientation, disability.
I like how they renamed that from Sex Party to Reason Party. That's quite a big jump to make.
Well, you can judge whether this is reasonable. So yes, include gender, sexual orientation, disability, and gender identity. And it looks like, because the Andrews government, they've put the proposed amendment to a government-dominated committee in the lower house, but it looks like reform of it will get bipartisan support because the Victorian Liberal opposition, they came out and said because there was a lot of outrage about a couple in the rural Victorian town of Bulla flying the Nazi flag, not the traditional Nazi flag, but like a 21st century, basically shitlord troll version with a whole bunch of other sort of modern things in it. So it wasn't really, so it wasn't actually like a historical Nazi flag. And so the Victorian opposition leader, Liberal Party champion of free speech, said that public display of the Nazi swastika should be illegal and should be considered serious vilification with a maximum prison sentence of 6 months.
It's a little bit concerning that we're now 80 years or something from World War II, and now suddenly we need to start banning swastikas. Yeah.
I mean, I assume it's still going to be allowed for artistic or news purposes.
That's what happens, right? So you had the issues like, I believe some Star Trek episodes were banned in Germany because of the heavy use of the swastikas in some of these original series episodes, and they had a ban on it in Germany. I believe they still have a ban on it.
Yeah,
perhaps. But it doesn't seem to help them because there are something like more Nazis in Germany now than there have been in the since 1945. So it comes down to the quite an expensive kind of virtue signaling where they end up just pushing people to something else and saying, oh well, why can't we show this? There's some conspiracy behind it, and on it goes, right?
Yeah, I mean the Nazis, they killed 17 million people, and obviously Jewish people are particularly offended by it, given that 6 million died in the Holocaust. But the communist hammer and sickle flag that killed 100 million people that should be banned as well, and the ISIS flag, because let's not remember the barbarity that they displayed when they had control of Western Iraq and Eastern Syria. Because I know, for example, a lot of Poles who, well, they suffered greatly under being a Soviet satellite state. They'd be particularly aggrieved and offended by the display of the hammer and sickle. So how far do you take it?
Well, they won't be taking it very far, but the point is, of course, that you shouldn't take it anywhere, because that's exactly where you end up. You can come up with many more examples of things that should be banned as well, and well, this is worse than this, and that's worse than the other thing, and on it goes, and it never ends. So you did have a story during before the show where you were telling me about the Chinese swastika flag. Maybe you could.
Should I show this?
Go. I think we'll be okay.
Okay, because this is a Danish newspaper drew a cartoon, and remember that Danish newspapers they set off the Islamists over their Prophet Muhammad cartoons, where they had a bomb as his turban. That was back in 2004. So, But this is the cartoon that a Danish newspaper, Jacqueline Poston, yes, the Chinese flag with instead of the communist stars, it has the disease molecules as the in place of the stars there. And yes, as I said before, cynosensitivity, the Chinese, they don't have much of a sense of humor, and so this was their response up here, to put a swastika on the Danish flag and put the Danish the cartoonist there, on the front of the swastika with I think he's got a Hitler moustache there.
At least the Chinese are nice enough not to behead them or, execute them publicly in the street.
We should remember that Denmark was occupied by Nazi Germany. They're not exactly a hotbed of Nazism.
No, and I was on that flag that you showed at first with the disease molecules. I've seen a funnier memed version where they've got Winnie the Pooh instead of the main.
Oh yeah, because
sneezing out the disease molecules.
Yeah, because Xi Jinping, he especially is not amused at anything.
Yeah. So, but yeah. Anyway, people should be allowed to have a little bit of fun. Obviously, the disease itself is rather serious and deadly, but people shouldn't be. This is, there were people making, keeping up humor and all sorts of things during the darkest days of World War II as well, during the London Blitz and so on. So the idea that people can't make some jokes and that people get offended by them, that's we've come to a very sad state.
There was a cafe in central Sydney that wrote a sign saying the coronavirus won't last long because it was made in China. But yes, they quickly got shamed and apologized.
Yeah, but like the jokes are relevant now. You should use them sparingly and keep people's spirits up, because the thing can be quite scary, especially if you're in one of the areas affected by the disease. So
I mean,
we've had it's a good segue as well into a joke that I had seen applied to the charges that have been laid against 4 Chinese businessmen connected to the Communist Party around by the Serious Fraud Office for electoral fraud. And I say 4 Chinese businessmen, that's my speculation or belief, as I understand it, because no MPs were charged, again, I believe. And there is name suppression here. I should say there's name suppression, and I don't actually know who they are, so I'm not trying to get myself in trouble here.
But when you say businessmen, like they're not like as like venture capitalists.
No, these are people who got rich in thanks to the crony system in China, where they obviously are supporting the aims of the Communist Party, else they wouldn't have gotten to where they were in the first place. And it's related to their donations. I'm not sure who was charged specifically, but it is related to the donations made by these businessmen. So
did they?
And it's referred to, but the joke here is I've seen people call it. So it's been called the Chinese donor virus.
Did they hand over physical cash? Because if New South Wales Labor Party were a scandal that led to the resignation of their state secretary general was that they accepted a $100,000 cash donation from a Chinese businessman, Quan Zhengimo, in an Audi bag. But so if they handed over cash, that cash could now be contaminated with the coronavirus.
No. I do believe this was simply donations that went into a bank account, into the National Party bank account. Sometime last year or the year before, when it was disclosed, we talked about it on the show or one of the other shows with you. So we've got some of the tapes and recordings, and I'm pretty certain it's related to this donation. So it predated the coronavirus.
We've had 12 confirmed cases in Australia. From what you said, there's none in New Zealand, even though New Zealand has a large Chinese population, and as we often joke, you are a satellite state of China.
Yes, I think there have been. I'm trying to remember the jokes that were used to refer to New Zealand as a satellite state. But sometimes I do refer to our government as the People's Republic of New Zealand, since that's sometimes what it feels like. But it's not that bad, Even when the Chinese control everything, they're still relatively benevolent for now. So,
well, the UK, they've just hired Huawei, the Chinese telecommunications company, to build their 5G network. Australia so far has refused, so they're working their way around the Five Eyes networks. I'm not sure that are they're going to be building New Zealand's 5G.
GCSB objected, and it was cancelled for now. And part of it is the United States is thinking of introducing and passing legislation that will actually block intelligence sharing with anyone using Huawei's infrastructure in their 5G networks. So, because we're already famous for being the most compromised part of the Five Eyes network, the GCSB made sure the government did not allow Huawei to be part of the network. So
so the UK has basically said, now hold my beer. We're gonna
we'll see how that one develops,
because they've just left their EU and now they're
we need some new friends. We need we need to rebuild the old Anglosphere alliances, and it's time to have a good deal with the UK. But yeah, I really do hope they're not putting China at the front of the line. That does not bode well for anybody.
And China has a very long memory. They remember their humiliation at the hands of the British colonizers. So yeah, I'm sure the Chinese were like, yeah, we'll build your 5G network, but it's like, ha, now tables are turned.
Yeah, exactly.
That's irony. That's irony to any
Irony.
Chinese people who are watching.
And it's the Chinese government as well, though. The Chinese people are very nice. I know lots of lovely Chinese people, and they all hate the Communist Party as well. So we're and that's usually the governments get tied in closely to the government, the name of the country and the government are tied together. But everybody knows that you're not talking about the people, except for the people who professionally get offended for a living.
Yeah, like Winnie the Pooh.
Have you? We've just hit 10 p.m., so it's my job to watch the clocks. You've got anything else, or shall we wrap?
Yeah, we'll wrap it up. We got it all.
There'll be another week next week, and we did almost get through everything. So
yeah,
we've done good. All right, thank you everyone for watching. My stuff is on Right Minds NZ during the week. You can go to rightmindsnz/donate if you want to help contribute. I'm going to be doing some sort of a membership thing. There will be more information about that in the Facebook and MeWe groups in the coming week or weeks. And thank you to the BFD as well. They edit all of my stuff and publish it on there as well, and they run the show on the as an embed on the website. And thank you to my moderators in the chat, and they also handle a lot of the social media stuff. So thanks to you guys for all the work you put in, and I will see you next week.
And I'll see you all tomorrow night for another episode of Wilmsfront, 7 p.m. Melbourne time, which will be on the Tim Wilms YouTube channel, as well as still on the Tim Wilms DLive channel. My guest will be Marcus Fu, who is one of the conservative warriors on Twitter, and the most common insult that's thrown his way is that he's a race traitor, because he's a migrant who loves Australia and is also a monarchist as well.
Sounds like my kind of guy.
Yeah, so it'll be his first interview on any platform, so we're both looking forward to it. And then, of course, night after is another episode of the Uncuckables, 8:30 p.m. Melbourne time on its channel. I have my own website, timwilms.com. The itself has been quite quiet recently. I've been preoccupied with doing some other filming for another project that we're doing behind the scenes, but there will be some fresh news posted in the coming days, and of course we give you the rundown of the news on whether it be Wilmsfront, this program, Uncockables. We make sure that we get it to you in some form. And of course, if you want to make sure we can cover as much news as possible, please support our work, as well as sending through super chats or lemons. Please sign up for an Unshackled membership at theunshackled.net/membership, or donate via the unshackled.net/donate. And of course, we are on Subscribestar. We have our store at theunshackled.net/store. If you go to my website, timwilms.com, you can subscribe to this program in Wilmsfront on podcast form, and also find the links to follow me on Gab and Telegram, which is where I'm spending a lot of my time now to interact with you, our followers and supporters.
And I should mention something I've just remembered as well. I'm going to have a debate or a discussion with some libertarians on the 22nd. So this will be a Saturday, the 22nd of February, so in about 3 weeks, a little bit less than that. And there'll be more details on where that will be hosted, but hopefully it'll be on the Right Minds YouTube channel, as well as several other places. And I believe the plan currently is for me to sit down and take the traditional conservative perspective and debate and discuss with Stephen Berry, who's the Libertarian. He's from the ACT Party, of course. So we're going to have an interesting discussion on the differences between conservatism and libertarianism in about 3 weeks. And more announcements on that will be coming in the next few weeks.
Stephen, I've been Facebook friends with him for a number of years now. He's pretty reasonable, level-headed libertarian. So I know the debate will be respectful. It's not with a lolbert who might get triggered.
Yeah, exactly. So it's going to be less of a debate and more of a discussion because we are both good friends as well. So.
Are you going to challenge Byron to a debate? Your new Twitter stalker?
No, I'm not. I don't actually run my own Twitter account, so I've got. I'll ask my Twitter person for an update on that, but I don't think he's been up to anything. So.
He has. He's becoming a bit obsessed with you now. I'm probably fueling it by keep mentioning him.
Yeah, but don't mention him on the show. You'll upset. You're upsetting my people as well. But I'm going to get an update on that. I'll get an update and I'll fill you in via a private message on Telegram.
All right. Good night, everyone. Thanks for watching. We'll both see you again next Tuesday.
Good night. See you next Tuesday.
Thanks for tuning in to this week's edition of Trans-Tasman Talk. To keep up with the latest real news and analysis from the Tasman nations, visit theunshackle.net and rightminds.nz.